Welcome into the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, local12.com digital sports columnist and editor with Rick Broering. As always, it's presented by Blake, the attorney Maisland. We got sports topics of local interest, maybe an incident that happened to me to talk about, a gambling segment, and my favorite segment of the podcast where you can go to the Twitterverse, hashtag Ask Skinny Anything. Before we start, a guy named George sent me a Ask Skinny Anything question on email. I really appreciate the question. It's a ranking question. As you know, I love those. But based on what we're about to tell you, I had some other situations that cropped up. George, I will get to yours. I promise next week. Rick, how are we doing?
I'm doing better than you, I would assume. Skinny, how are you feeling right about now?
I've learned to adapt in many ways. So do you want me to just spill the story quickly and we move on, or you want to just keep poking the bear with this? How do we want to do this?
Go ahead. So we'll set it up. Obviously, last week we were asking about your escapades from the previous Bengals game. You said, not a lot went on. Well, this time you told us, hey, I'm going down to play golf. I got a nice college football night ahead on Saturday, and then the Bengals game Sunday. Going to be a good trip to Charlotte. Unfortunately for you, and by the way, your team, Kentucky football, had a massive win during that time. So I'm assuming it was a great night for you. Turns out Saturday night did not quite go as planned.
Yeah, so my buddy and I met at the park and ride on the AA highway about 6:15 on Saturday morning. He was the driver. We drove down, even though it rained for a good chunk of it. We made good time. Got to the Carolinas. We were going to play at a golf course in Virginia, but we called the course numerous times Saturday morning. They never answered, so we were assuming that they were maybe not open because of weather. So we did find a course in Statesville, North Carolina, about 45 miles short of Charlotte. Turned out to be a very nice course. Was a little wet in spots, but terrific course. Not very crowded, so he and I played pretty quick, so we got around. He brought a speaker, had the iHeart app, so I was listening to the Kentucky game the whole time. It was perfect, and it was perfect because I played really well, probably the best I played all summer, and Kentucky wins, and we're having a good time. Had a couple of beers, that was all. Got in the car, drove down to Charlotte, got to our hotel about 6 o'clock-ish. Showered up real quick, and then we were going to go meet some people just at a bar restaurant down the street from the hotel, a little short 5 to 10 minute walk. And to your point, watch the college football that night. The UC game was on. The Alabama Georgia game was obviously on. It was a great restaurant bar, except for one small problem, Rick. So on the way, I'm going to see if I can find this photo, and I don't know if it'll work. On the way, it was a crowded sidewalk. And along the sidewalk in downtown Charlotte, they have trees planted, and they're nice trees. And honestly, they had this along the banks too downtown. I just noticed this the other night when I was downtown on Tuesday night, that it's a similar setup, although they have wider sidewalks. Let me just tell you. And so people be careful.
Important to the story.
Yes, important to the story. Yeah. So a guy kind of comes between us, and we kind of let the guy slide by. So I slide to my left, he slides to his right. When I slide to my left, lo and behold, Rick, I don't know if people can see this photo. Wait a minute, where am I going with it? That's a grate surrounding a tree. You see that grate?
Yes. Yep.
You may not be able to see
watching, it's a sidewalk with one of those trees in the sidewalk and a black grate surrounding the tree where it's planted.
Yes. So that grate, I don't know if you can tell, it's raised a little bit. Probably Father Time has sunk the concrete around it and all that. Well, I didn't see it, and I proceeded to trip on it and fall straight forward. I somehow caught myself with my hands extended, to which I got up. I looked at my knees that were bloody. That didn't even bother me. I get skinned. We've all skinned our knees. I skinned them 1,000 times in my life from playing ball. And so I looked down, I got skinned knees. And all of a sudden, this radiating pain shot through my arms. And I literally went, oh my God, I've broken both arms. You got to be freaking kidding me. So I get up, my buddy's with, he's like, man, we got to go. I said, hang on, give me a minute. So I'm leaning against a concrete pillar. And I'm thinking, this pain's going to go away. It wasn't, it was shooting pain initially. It's going to go away. I'm like, give me a minute. Next thing I know, he's in my face and he says, dude, you just fainted. I'm like, I'm all right. I said, get me back up. I'm okay. So I proceed to actually go to the bar restaurant, sit there in absolute agony and misery, pain shooting through both arms. I watched the games, had some chicken wings and drank some beer. Got back to the hotel that night and could not sleep a wink. I was a mess. And so the next morning I said, man, we got to go get me a couple braces for these elbows are killing me. So we went and got that. That felt better, but I said, I'm probably going to just cover the game from my room. I called the people on the beat. I said, I'm not going to make it. I'll just take the generic quotes that come from the like, no, we'll help you. I said, okay. So I proceeded to write a game story, do a Zoom interview with guys at our station, do a podcast with Mike Petraia, our post-game podcast, wrote a column, and felt good about myself, actually, and then went back to the same. That's where I took the picture, was the next night. I walked to the same restaurant bar to meet the same folks to watch the Bills game. So drove back Monday, went right to Cincy UC Ortho Cincy Urgent Care. By the way, tip of the cap to them. I'm going to give you. I was in and out of that place in an hour.
Oh, that's nice.
They took X-rays of both arms, and the doctor comes in and goes, "I got some bad news and good news for you." I said, "Lay the bad news on me." He said, "Well, you got fractures of both elbows." I said, "The good news is they will heal on their own and you won't need surgery." So there I am, Rick.
If you're not watching this on YouTube, Skinny has the double elbow brace going on as he just raised up both of his arms. And Skinny, obviously, well, the first question is,
I wish I could tell people I was drunk when I did it, but I wasn't. That's the sad part to it.
Yeah, that's the first question. Is everyone wants to know how much were you drinking? As you said, you guys had only had a couple beers at the golf course and then driven, so it wasn't like you had been pounding beers all day. It wasn't that type of situation like everyone assumed. The second question is, our sponsor is probably going to be mad at you. Did you immediately call Blake Maislet up and be like 4444444? I've got a case. I saw that picture, Skinny. You've got a case. It's raised. I see the great raised.
I do, and honestly, there's a part of me that wants to do it not for the financial benefit, because I'll bet you that's happened before. And honestly, it's going to happen to somebody again. It really is.
Yeah, you should sue them for the next person that might trip.
Yeah,
that's really
actually the buddy I went with at the game. I guess they had where they were tailgating. They had kind of a similar setup with the trees, and he actually caught a woman before she basically did the same thing. So I'm like, maybe we shouldn't use the grates to protect the trees. I don't even know what the point of that is. Do you know what the point of that is?
No, but I would love, you know what? Let's get t-shirts and make signs and go down and pick it down by the banks and be like, you need to fix this. This is dangerous. Like, let's be really against grates around trees.
The one thing about the banks I got to give them is their sidewalks are nice and wide. That's the good part.
Well,
so you shouldn't be walking where the trees are.
That's because they're newer. They haven't I guess the wide part is good, but they haven't sunken in yet with the grate part. It could still be an issue down the road.
That's correct. So, they tell me 6 to 8 weeks they'll heal on their own.
Skinny, I'm going to imagine having double broken elbows would present some challenges to your daily life. Have you found any issues that have arisen as a result of having both elbows incapacitated?
Well, I took my first full shower today. I had just basically gone through washing my hair and shaving every day. Shaving was a chore because some days I can't. Like today, I'm fine. I got this is probably the best range of motion I've had with this arm, and I can get all the way up here. The other arm's kind of dicey at times of where it can go. So I was basically able to wash my hair and clean my face, shave my face, but hadn't had a full body wash since Saturday. So that probably wasn't the best thing. I didn't really wash. I just stood in the shower and let the water run all over me. That at least I feel better about myself with that.
I'm a chicken wing with soap once in a while, like splash on yourself.
I am a hygiene guy. Now, the one thing I will say is I still can put deodorant on, and you know me, I'm a big Downy, those little pod guy. So those things make your clothes smell good. So even though I haven't fully showered like I should, hygiene is important to me. But at some point, you just got to do what you just got to do, my man.
Well, no free ads, but I did not know you were a Downy pods guy, so that's good to know.
Yeah, and those little pills, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And I'm not going to lie to anybody. I mean, going number 2 is just not fun. The going part's fine.
Fine. Yeah.
The aftermath is. So I have to take, because I can't really fully reach around to where our toilet paper is. Before I go, I have to take sheets off, right, and kind of put them in a nice little stack where I can reach over to get them. Yep, and then the thing is, I can't use, as good as it sounds, I got good range of motion with this arm, but I can't use this arm it just won't go where it needs to go. So the other arm hurts at a spot, but then when I get it in the correct spot, I'm fine. But it takes me a while to figure out how that correct angle is. And it's
wait, can you wipe left-handed? I don't think I've ever done that in my life.
I have to. I mean, I can't get my right. That's the point. I've never done it that way, but yeah.
I feel like that would be a challenge in itself. I don't think I've ever done that motion with the left.
Yeah.
That'd be tough.
Yeah. It's
all right. Well, that's usually where we end the podcast, is with bathroom talk. Instead, we're starting there today. Your elbows. We wish you a speedy recovery. That's out of the way.
Just insane.
Let's go on to the other big news of the week.
Yes. Please.
Smaller than your elbows, but also pretty big in Cincinnati. Yeah. Pete Rose died of heart disease on Monday. He was 83 years old. He obviously leaves behind a complicated legacy, both locally and nationally. What will come to mind for you when you think of Pete Rose going forward, Skinny?
I try to think of him as the player. I mean, I grew up watching him. That was my teenage into high school years, was the Big Red Machine teams of the 70s, and went to a lot of games. I mean, back then, literally my dad or another dad would drop me and a couple of buddies up. There used to be a Ramada Inn in Florence on US 42. I don't know what it is now. But you were able to catch the tank bus there and take the tank bus to the Riverfront Stadium. It'd drop you off. You'd go in the game. You'd buy a $2.50 ticket. My dad would usually give me like $10, $2.50 for the ticket. You can get a hot dog, get a helmet sundae, and then I'd usually buy one of those big plastic helmets. So when we played fast pitch, like tennis ball in the back, you'd be that team and play their lineup that day. So yeah, that for me, I want to remember Pete as that guy, because his life after baseball got really ugly and messy, and actually then some remnants of what he did off the field in his playing days also came to pass. But I guess I want to remember him as a baseball player, but I think you've said it best. It is a complicated legacy, and anybody that thinks otherwise, I just think's fooling themselves.
Yeah, I think one of the interesting things that has happened is, like, for the generation right above me, my parents, even like an older brother, if I had like a 45-year-old brother, you'd probably feel the same way. But I noticed anyone that's a little bit above my generation has the feelings of Pete as he's a superhero. He's larger than life. He was everything to the city as a sports figure, at least for the most part, if they were really into sports. For my generation, I think we all saw just after we never saw him as a player, really, right? We only saw kind of the aftermath. And I think all of us kind of have this, really, this is your guy, like this cheap, chintzy caricature of a troubled person is the guy that you guys hold up on this pedestal. And that kind of became weird over the last probably 15 to 20 years, where more people were like, wait, why are you guys so obsessed with him? Why are you celebrating him so much? And I think it was just hard to connect those two eras. The people that had grown up to become adults and started questioning, like, why does anyone like this guy, versus the people who had watched him as a player, knew what he meant and knew what he represented to the city through his athletic achievements, not really anything he did off the field.
No, and I think that's just it, because if you want to talk about embodying Cincinnati, right, guy from the west side of town, and I think you'd agree with this, whether you're from Northern Kentucky like we are, the east side of Cincinnati, the northern side of Cincinnati, the west side of Cincinnati is the heart and soul of the city. It always has been. It's changed over time, but it's been the heart and soul of the city. So he comes from the heart and soul of the city, one of our own, played the game like no other from an intensity standpoint, led teams to championships and wins. And so I think that's where you couldn't help but fall in love with the things he did and what he embodied and the fact he was one of ours. But yeah, Rick, I fully admit, because I'm of the generation clearly way older than you that saw him play, saw his fallacies after playing, that I can also admit that part of Pete Rose is not a good guy.
Yeah, and I think that's just it. It mattered. You needed to have seen the playing part to understand where all of that love for him came from. Otherwise, it was sort of like, wait, why is that going on? And I think because of that, like, if you had brought Pete Rose's name up in this city 10 years ago, it was nothing but like everybody loved him. Why isn't he in the Hall of Fame? People had shirts for him all the time. If you brought him up within the last 10 years, I think that started to change a little bit. So some people in the city were like, kind of like tired of hearing about this guy. Like, why do we keep talking about him in this way? And it's one of those situations where it's both sides are fair. Like, both arguments are right. Both takes on the guy are right. And that's why we say, he had a complicated life. He did a lot of interesting things. And in many ways, he was very flawed. But there's also that just incredible baseball career where he really represented a lot of things to a lot of people. And that makes him matter. And I think really when someone like that passes away, you get into more of the nostalgia and what he means to families, what he means to dads and sons. And that's why I think this passing means a lot to a lot of people in the city.
Yeah, and I mean, you've had a handful of guys from that Big Red Machine era pass away, and not all obviously, but a handful. And this was the one that, because the other part too is it just felt like it came out of the blue, right? I mean,
he's 83 and his health was bad, so I guess it shouldn't have. But I said the same thing yesterday. I was like, I couldn't believe this happened, even though he's 83 and we knew his health was bad. Yeah,
but it's weird, Rick. When he came back for I believe the jersey retirement or the statue, I can't remember which. I think it was the jersey retirement a handful of years ago. If you'd have told me that was a 75, 76-year-old man, I'd have scoffed, because he didn't look it. I mean, he still looked vibrant and upbeat and enthusiastic. And yeah, time can certainly change that when you get older, and it certainly changed Pete's health. But to your point of Monday night, I told you I went to the doctor, got my diagnosis, kind of a emotionally exhausting and just physically exhausting day for me. I sit down in we have a lounge chair in our living room that my wife usually sits in, but I'm like, I need to sit here because I can rest my elbows on it. I'm probably going to wind up sleeping here, which I have for 3 nights. So I'll probably wind up sleeping here. So sit down, it's about 7:30, football game's about to start. And all of a sudden I see a tweet about Pete passing, and I called my boss, and he said, "Man, I can't get to a laptop for 15 minutes. Can you do it?" And I went, "Who?" And I thought, well, you know what? I'm in a better place than he is at the moment. So yeah, this is the worst thing I got to do is get out of this chair and go write this man's obit. Oh, so be it.
It was almost eerie that they got them all together for that card signing.
Sunday.
The guys that were still around. I mean, really the day that he died or the day before he died, essentially.
Yep.
Now I imagine it happened probably overnight then too, or early in the morning. So it's like really his last day was kind of spent with some of those former teammates, which is crazy to think about. Final question here. Do you want to see him go in the Hall of Fame now?
It's funny. So I in my sports talk radio days, I got a lot of heat from people when I said, "Hey, Pete bet on baseball. Don't kid yourself. He's lying to you. He's lying to you." And people didn't want to believe it. And then I think they were let down when he finally did admit to it. I think he deserves in. I've always thought he deserves in. I've always thought that the banishment for lifetime, he also brought on himself because he was never contrite. He never was going to do the things to change that they asked him to do in order to maybe be put back into the game where then he could be put on the Hall of Fame ballot. I don't know. I think it'd be one of those things. If his family wants him to be in, if they come to the point of thinking of putting him in, then those are the people that need to answer that question. I guess I would go with the family's wishes on this. I think it would be a shame though if suddenly there was a 180 done by baseball or anybody else to put him back in the game posthumously and then put him on the ballot posthumously and put him in posthumously. What were we doing? I mean, did we really want to hurt that guy that much? I get he wasn't contrite. And that's the thing. And the flip side is if Pete had literally just admitted this, he probably would have had a 1-year ban from baseball. He probably would have never been allowed to. He would never have been allowed to coach or manage a team. But it would have been a 1-year banishment. Then he would have been reinstated, if you will, for lack of a better term. No one was going to hire him because at that point you're a black sheep. But then he would have been eligible for the Hall of Fame and would have gotten in.
Yeah, and it mattered a lot to him. I mean, there are some guys where I don't know if it matters as much, something like that. But Pete Rose, baseball was everything to him. And as silly as it might sound to some people, I think it would have mattered a ton for him to be in. He even said maybe a year or two ago, he was doing an interview with someone, and he said, "Wouldn't that be terrible if I died like in the next year or so?" And then they decided to put me in because he was basically saying, "I don't know what they're waiting for." Yes. When someone asked him that question, he said, "Wouldn't it be terrible if I died and then they put me in?" Which I agree with. I think it would be almost be like spitting in his face to put him in now.
I agree. And that's the thing, though. I mean, they asked him to do certain things. There's certain conditions for him, and he just wouldn't do it. And even like during Hall of Fame induction week, he goes to Cooperstown to sign autographs, and it's almost thumbing his nose at that. And so, again, it's almost like you can't have your cake and eat it too. On the flip side, I'm still in that camp that says, let's just put him in for what he did on the field. I'm even with the steroid guys. Put him in for what they did on the field in that era because they all did it in that era.
Yeah, and that is something that people always bring up. They'll bring up the steroids. They'll also bring up the fact that baseball has now gotten into bed with gambling and use those as reasons that Pete should have been reinstated. But
I don't think that's a good reason, Rick, because I'll let you finish. I think you're going to go where I was going to go. So I'll let you finish.
Yeah, it completely misses the point in both cases. The steroid thing, while yes, terrible, yes, it's cheating. It was never in question whether those guys were trying to win. They were cheating to win, which is still, it's not good for the sport, but it still doesn't ruin the sport. And same thing with getting in bed with gambling. It's like, well, yeah, you can have sponsorships with gambling companies. It's not the same as saying someone in your sport might have questioned the integrity of it and might not be trying to win games because they bet against their team. You just can't have that in your sport or it turns into professional wrestling. And that's why he was banned and those other things haven't been taken that same way. Nothing has changed in that regard, by the way. Him dying doesn't change that. I don't really have a problem with them keeping the ban personally.
No, and the other part to that too is, and that's brought up of how hypocritical is baseball because now they're in bed with gambling entities. Players still are not allowed to bet on the game. In fact, we've seen guys that have been banned when they've gotten caught doing that. So they're still trying to maintain integrity of the game. Does it mean everybody has not slipped through the cracks? Yeah, probably there's a guy or two that slipped through the cracks on this, and that's a damn shame. But for the most part, they get the guys that are betting on the game, and they can't. You're still not allowed to do it, even if it's legal. You're still not allowed to do it.
Yep. All right. Anything else on Pete Rose before we move to the Bengals?
No, I mean, like I said, growing up, I emulated him as a player. I mean, as a cheesy as it sounds, I used to run down to first base on walks like he did. I always felt like I was of medium talent and I had to do everything I could to get the most out of my talent. The one thing I couldn't, I actually could switch hit playing fast pitch tennis ball. I never did try it in hardball. I didn't get in the same crouch that Pete did in stance wise. So I didn't emulate those things, but I did emulate everything else about him. And I think a lot of guys of my generation did the same thing.
I want to know how many guys of my age grew up and had their dad or a coach explain to them who Pete Rose was and why you needed to emulate him. Because that was for all of us. It's like, Pete Rose used to sprint down to first base after everyone. Things like that. We always got told stories like that. I mean, I can remember being coach's pitch, like 8, 9 years old, and people would bring up Pete Rose to us to explain how he was supposed to play.
Yeah, last than that, you know why, Rick? You couldn't emulate Willie Mays or Hank Aaron because they were supernatural talents.
Yeah.
Pete, I don't think he ever got credit for the athlete he was, because he was extremely athletic. I mean, I didn't realize this. I was reading a piece from Dan Weber on NKY Tribune. He was going back to, I guess, some charity game that Pete played in, some charity basketball game he played in at Covcath many, many, many years ago. And he threw down a 2-hand tomahawk dunk. Think about that dude throwing down a dunk.
Well, that's the thing about Pete is it's like everyone talks about all this stuff about he was like average, but it's like he was also this chubby, barrel-chested guy who was big, clearly wasn't in the best shape, and he was still a good athlete. So that tells you he had pretty good genes too. He was pretty talented physically.
Yeah, no, but I still think he's a guy that you always felt like got every ounce out of his ability, and that's what you were striving to do.
He looked like the everyman, and that's why it worked for everyone around here so much. Yep. All right, let's switch gears here to the Bengals, Skinny. And the big news, at least from my vantage point, came on Wednesday when Trey Hendrickson, BJ Hill, Myles Murphy, and McKinley Jackson all practiced, according to reports on Twitter. What does that mean for Sunday? Are some of these guys going to be back available? How much will they have in terms of firepower on that front line?
Yeah, I'll start with BJ because I specifically talked to him in the locker room afterwards yesterday, and he said he feels like he can go, and in fact he said I'm going to play on Sunday. So barring any setback today, we're doing this on Thursday. There's not going to be a setback in the walkthrough, I wouldn't think, on Friday. So barring any setback today, BJ Hill will be available, and that's huge. I mean, now you got BJ Hill and Chris Jenkins at least probably playing the majority of the snaps. Sheldon Rankins doesn't look like he wasn't out there yesterday, so he's not going to be available. I think Myles Murphy practicing full was a great sign. I think it means he'll get some snaps on Sunday. Trey participating, coming off the stinger. I can't imagine he doesn't participate on Sunday. McKinley Jackson's the one I'm just not sure is quite ready, Rick. As Lou Anarumo said on Monday, he said, look, and this is before, they made the decision to reinstate him off the injured reserve and then put him in practice on Wednesday. He said, look, man, he's only had 3 padded practices to this point, so I don't even know what I'm going to get out of him. Now, maybe he shows him something in yesterday's practice because he was a full participant, today's practice. And if so, then maybe you get him up for a handful of snaps. I just don't know if he's quite there yet. I think he would be the icing on the cake. I think you get the other 3 back, though, for Sunday.
I know they won this past Sunday against Carolina, and you and Trags broke that down, so we're not going to go into too much detail there. But how much of the issues that they've had defensively and the issues that they've had against the run, even in this last Sunday's game when they won, how much of that will be fixed by getting a BJ Hill back or getting just some more depth on that front line?
No, for starters, as you know, it's a hard opponent to fix it against even when you are healthy, right?
Yeah, we'll talk more about that too.
But I want to lean into the first 2 games against New England. And I know their offense wasn't great, and I know what they did in the run game, but that was mostly missed tackles. And then what they did overall against Kansas City, and it was with Sheldon Rankins and BJ Hill both healthy. They held New England to 13 points. 3 others came on the Charlie Jones fumbled punt. Against Kansas City, they held them to 19 points. 7 others came on that scoop and score fumble return. And honestly, 3 others came on the Dejon Anthony interference call at the end of the game. So it tells me that missing that kind of ability in the middle was a factor. And I don't know if you saw the stat on Zach Carter this week or not, where he's ranked 113 out of 113 among interior defensive linemen in pass rush win rate. In fact, out of 80 pass rush snaps for him this year, do you know how many pass rush wins he has?
1 or 2.
I'd like to be able to do. I think I can do. Let me see. This will be a monumental moment. 0. And so that tells you that dude's pretty ineffective, right? And so literally any warm breathing body you put in there is going to be better. And oh, by the way, that warm breathing body was one of your starters in BJ Hill. And I think that's a factor getting him back. You put him with what Chris Jenkins did last week. And, again, a week more removed from his thumb surgery. I think that helps a lot. The problem is you are facing just a dynamic overall offense in Baltimore, and especially on the ground.
That stat for Zach Carter was pass rush win rate, you said?
Yes.
And I believe 2 weeks ago, Sam Hubbard ranked dead last in his position in that same stat. So that, I mean, he's dealing with some physical issues as well, trying to play through it. But that tells you about some of the issues the Bengals have had getting to the quarterback. That's really held them back.
Yeah, and that's where, I don't know how many snaps they would have planned for Myles Murphy. Maybe it's a 50-50 rotation with Sam. Maybe it's more. Maybe it's a little bit less. But, maybe on third downs, he is the guy that plays opposite Trey Hendrickson and does give you some pass rush. And Sam can just kind of hold his own against the run like he tries to. I mean, listen, that dude's playing hurt. And because of where they were last week, there were times they put him at nose tackle. I mean, you can say what you want, and obviously the numbers don't lie and the eyeballs don't lie in watching Sam play, but you can't help but admire the guy for trying to do what he's trying to do when they absolutely need him desperately.
You would think, if nothing else, even if Myles Murphy is going to do nothing in his career or with the Bengals, you would think just having a fresh set of legs and an extra body to give Sam a break occasionally is going to be helpful if he can go. Ramondre Stevenson, Isaiah Pacheco, Chuba Hubbard, these are pretty good backs, but Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson are a different animal. Do the Bengals have any chance of stopping this rushing attack for the Ravens, or is this going to be a massacre on the ground?
Yeah, the problem is if you scheme it so much to stop the run, they've done such a good job with their play action stuff, and they get those. Isaiah Likely such a good receiving tight end that they sneak him in that middle ground. I don't know how much of the game. I only watched the first half of the game the other night, Rick, before we went back.
Man,
to the
they looked good.
And, oh my gosh, they looked unstoppable. It was almost like, let's see, we want to run this play here for this many yards. Now let's play around and go, we'll play fake and we'll hit you right about there. I mean, dudes were running wide open, and maybe that was an indictment on the Buffalo defense that night, but it just looks so scary to watch. And then those times where you line up a 300-pound fullback and Patrick Ricard in front of a 265-pound tailback and Derrick Henry, that just doesn't seem fair or right.
On one of his runs, I think he was at like 22 or 24 miles an hour or something.
He was cooking.
It was the fourth fastest speed clocked by an offensive player this year.
Yeah.
That's that guy running that way. That's scary to think about. And he's how many years into this now?
Right. That's the thing.
I
listen, I understood the signing, but I thought, okay, that's a good idea. You get a guy for 15 to 18. They're kind of using him that way. But what all can he give you? Well, he can still give you a home run. That's the thing. And then when they want to give him Justice Hill's a shifty little back. I mean, it's a really, really good offense.
Justice Hill is a really nice compliment to him. And by the way, they honestly don't even need it most of the time because Derrick Henry's running so well. And you have Lamar Jackson as a change of pace to go with them. That's a terrifying backfield to game plan for. And it's like the Bengals played well in their game against Carolina. As a Bengals fan, you kind of take a deep breath and you're thinking, okay, well, the Ravens haven't been great so far this year. Looks like the Bengals are playing better. I feel better going into next week. And then you watch that Sunday night game and you see what they did to the Bills. And it's like, well, I no longer feel so good about that matchup anymore. So the last two seasons, the Bengals are 1-3 against the Ravens. Obviously, there haven't been a lot of matchups where both of the starting quarterbacks have played the complete game against each other in this matchup. So it'll be fun to see them go back at it. Skinny, the Bengals offensive line has allowed the fewest quarterback pressures per dropback through the first 4 weeks of the NFL season. They've allowed pressures on 19.5% of dropbacks. The Chiefs are second in the league at 24% of their dropbacks. How much does that tell us about the play of the Bengals offensive line to this point? Is that more scheme and they're just getting the ball out quick to protect Joe, or are these guys really holding up well?
I think it's a combination because I think you've seen dropbacks. I think, they've gone to some of the play action stuff. And as you know, I mean, unless you're bootlegging and, some of the play action stuff, you've got to set in your pass protection for a period of time if you're going to hit something down the field. And I do think they've done a good job. But I also think schematically with the two tight end looks, you're able to, sometimes max protect with keeping one or two of those guys in. In fact, I think in the Washington game, they went two tight ends on the left on the 41-yard touchdown pass to Chase. And I'll put the binoculars on as soon as the ball snapped, I'll watch the line play for a second and then I'll drop them to see where the play is going to go. And it was really noticeable that they kept both those tight ends to pass protect on that play. They max protected and were able to hit Chase because they got the one-on-one matchup. But then, you got, and I'm writing a story on Eric All today. I mean, what he does as a blocker in the run game. And I just think they're a really diverse offense that they're hard to stop. And listen, I fully tell you it's Washington's defense. It's Carolina's defense, but this Bengals offense looks really, really hard to stop at the moment because they can pick their poison in so many ways. And I still don't think they've completely reached their full potential yet. And I think that's, because they haven't had a ton of snaps with T. Higgins in there. You got now 2 full games with him under the belt. I think they're really starting to figure out what they can do in all facets. I mean, they've run it well the last 2 weeks. The Washington, they didn't run it a lot, 20 times for 120 yards, but they averaged 6 yards a pop that night. The other day against Carolina, literally Carolina knows you're trying to run out the clock, and the Bengals just kept lining up and running it right down their throat. So I think this just feels like it's got a shootout written all over it. There may not be a lot of possessions in this game because neither one's going to get many stops and trying to eliminate big plays on both sides, but it has a chance to be in the 30s, in my opinion.
For Ja'Marr Chase, was the key for him just getting T. Higgins back? It seems like everything's gone back to normal since then. His attitude is better. His body language is better. He's obviously been more productive. Was that it?
I think it's a big part of it. It was interesting. T had 6 catches for 60 yards in the first half against Carolina. It was almost like Carolina said, hey, we're going to let Ja'Marr Chase is not beating us over the top. So T was running wild, nothing major, but was running in those intermediate zones. And then it felt like Carolina said, okay, we can't let that happen any longer. So let's not do what we're doing. And then you get Ja'Marr to hit a big play and voila. I mean, I think that is the compliment to that. I think the same thing in the Washington game where even though it was only his first game back and he didn't do a ton, 3 catches, 39 yards, you did see Ja'Marr Chase get some one-on-one opportunities and they were able to take advantage of those. So yeah, I do think it's part of that. I think it's part of, again, that second game of the season when they got all those tight ends involved. You got that on film for now defenses to go, well, they're utilizing the tight end a lot and they're running it well and they got play. I think they give defenses a lot of stress points.
Do you think that is like, again, the last few years, it's been like things out of their control. Joe Burrow's not healthy. And this year, maybe you could say the same thing with the Ja'Marr Chase situation with the contract and the T. Higgins not being available that first week. Do you feel like now that we're past it and it looks like they are righting the ship once again and the offense looks like it's returned to form, is it something schematically where they just need a couple weeks to figure out how they're going to attack the season with that personnel? Or is it something where each year there's just been something off with this group that's held them back and they've had to get guys right?
No, I think I don't want to say they lucked into the 12 personnel. I just think once they saw how effective it could be, they started to lean into it. Remember a couple of years ago, when they were struggling to the first 2 games and remember Dallas teed off on them defensively and they're 0-2. Remember they leaned heavily into the RPO game and that became a thing for them. The year before that, I believe it was when they changed the whole run scheme halfway through and went from instead of zone blocking to a lot of pin and pull concept.
True. Yeah.
And I think that's a sign of what a good staff is. You can say, well, why didn't you figure this out earlier? Well, sometimes you got to see it play out in order to figure it out.
Well, I agree with that. And I'd say the sign of a good staff is that they can adjust to the players that they have and the personnel that they have. But I would also say there definitely seems to be something to this group getting off to slow starts and not being able to figure out right away where other teams obviously can. So it sort of frustrates me both sides. I would say I'm thrilled that they have figured it out once again and they've gotten back on track seemingly, but it is frustrating that once again, they have no wiggle room the rest of the year because they got off to a slow start and lost some games they shouldn't have.
And that's the thing. That's the thing about where they're at and what this game means for them. It feels like it means more than a game, right? Yeah. I know they're not going to talk in those terms. And listen, they could play a really good game. Let's just say lose 31-28, right? Or even 31-30. Play a really good game. And at the end of the day, the loss it digs you in such a hole because you've given yourself no wiggle room. I think we're going to look back on this season, however it turns out, and you're going to go, how in the hell did you lose to 3-win New England? And say, you know what? I see how they lost to Washington. That ended up being a pretty damn good team when all was said and done. So, okay, while we thought 3-1 was the measuring stick, maybe in retrospect, Washington is pretty. I mean, they've looked just ridiculously good on offense for 3 weeks running now. But the point to that is, to your point, you've left yourself no margin for error. I mean, they lose this game and you can come out of it going, man, we did a lot of good things. And you can point to, hey, you keep doing those the rest of the season, you're going to win a lot of games. The problem is at that point at 1-4, Rick, I think we would agree 10-7 would be the mark at a minimum to make the playoffs, maybe 9-8, but let's just go with 10-7. You got to go 9-3 the rest of the way and still have to go to Baltimore, to Pittsburgh, to Cleveland, to Dallas. I'm probably missing a 2 in there. I mean, you got to go to the Chargers. I mean, that's a big ask to go 9-3 with those many road games left.
Yeah, and that's the whole issue. Again, this team can play with anybody. They've proven that over the last few years. Like, it doesn't worry me that they have to play those good teams later in the year. They can win those games. What worries me is that they now have no margin for error, and it's the NFL. You can't win every game. It's very rare that they go on a run like they did a few years ago when they ran to the Super Bowl because they got so hot. That's tough to do in the NFL on a regular basis.
Agreed.
All right, let's switch gears here to college football, Skinny. We'll start with your boys. Kentucky comes up with a 2017 win against Ole Miss. They have a bye this week, so they get the week off afterwards. You don't have to worry about the getting too high and over celebrating and then having a letdown right after it. They'll have a week to get right. Let's go back to the fourth and eighth play late in the game, because we just had that situation with Georgia. It's a little bit different, obviously, but we had the situation where it's fourth and medium or long to go for it. Feels like it's the game could be out of hand. If you don't get it, it's definitely over. And Stoops decided to punt against Georgia. He got crushed for it. This time he decides to go for it, and it turns into a miraculous play for Kentucky, ends up winning the game. I mean, do you feel like he got peer pressured by the fans from the Georgia game, or do you think he really felt like that situation was different?
Yeah, I think, again, you go back to the Georgia game, you played that not to lose when you had everything to gain by playing it to win. And I think that's maybe the mindset in this one was, listen, I got a chance to play to win. I get a second chance to play to win and win a big game. I'm playing to win this time. And I guess kudos to him for going ahead and doing it. Even if it had failed, maybe you trust your defense to hold them to 3 there and give yourself some kind of chance at the end. But the bottom line was, so as I mentioned, I listened to the game on the radio. The radio call from Tom Leach was just superb. And then I eventually did see the highlight of it. Seeing the highlight of it, the radio call was great because he gets excited with the catch, but I'm picturing in my head that he's got like a step on the defender when he caught it, because the way the play developed. When you see the highlight, when I saw the highlight, I went, "Oh my God, that was really contested. Oh dear God, that was almost not complete." Yeah,
I mean, just an incredible play. They were talking about the Stevie got loose play and comparing it to that. And
the Louisville
it's kind of at that level. I mean, at least in terms of importance and how big it was. This was a game where I felt like, it's not a must win for Kentucky by any stretch of the imagination, but for Mark Stoops, it felt like a very important win because especially with all the talking he's done, running his mouth the last 2 seasons, when he lost that game at South Carolina, against South Carolina, it really felt like things were starting to turn against him within the fan base, and people were getting tired of him. I think a lot of people had already punted on this season, which makes this win a little probably less satisfying for a lot of fans who felt like the year was already over, and then you pull off a big win like that. Huge win for Mark Stoops to get people back on his side. But now, Skinny, here's the heart-wrenching part of this. If they had beaten South Carolina, would we be talking about a playoff team?
So the next 3 games, and you mentioned there's a bye this week, and I do, to your point, I think it came at the exact perfect time. I don't care who was next on that schedule, even a Vandy, because they are next. But if you'd have played them, the emotion of that, the letdown factor was going to be so damn high. So that extra week, I think, helps immensely. But the next 3 games are all winnable. Vandy at home, at Florida, Auburn at home. You would have been, if you'd beaten South Carolina, 7-1 going to Tennessee. I'm not here to tell you they beat Tennessee, but there's a lot of people that were here to tell you they weren't going to Ole Miss and winning. I think Tennessee's a better team. You play them 10 times out of 10 times in Knoxville, you might win once, but that's all it would take. I mean, I still think, Rick, if they go to Knoxville and win that game, they're 7-2. They then have a game with Murray, and then they would probably have to pull off one more big one, but they get the opportunity with Texas. I don't think they can beat Texas by any stretch of the imagination, but you get that opportunity. But to your point, a 1-loss Kentucky, then beating a Tennessee might even give them wiggle room to go lose to Texas. And let's say a close game. And your resume is, your resume, and then they play Louisville. Let's say they beat Louisville. Your resume that would be what would then be 10-2 with a 1-point loss to Georgia. And again, let's just say a close loss to Texas. At the point of the season, arguably, they would probably be, I think Georgia will wind itself back up in the top 3, 4, or 5 before it's all said and done. 2 of the top 4 teams in the country.
Skinny, go look at the bubble right now, if you will, for the playoff.
It's loaded.
Well, I mean, yeah, but there are teams that are not going to be undefeated or 1-loss team. I mean, like, there are going to be teams with losses in here.
Right.
There are going to be teams that we do not think are teams that should be competing for a national championship in the playoff this year. If Kentucky were, their only loss right now is a 1-point loss to Georgia.
Yep.
I'm not so sure they couldn't lose both of those Texas and Tennessee games and still be in the conversation had they won against South Carolina. I mean, that's the thing that this game might have done for you had you not let that South Carolina. And the good thing I don't know if it's a good thing, but I guess on one hand, it's a good thing that it wasn't close. I mean, it's not like they had one little thing up or one penalty went against them that cost them that South Carolina game. They got smoked in that game, which it looked like a bad sign. It felt like the season was over at the time. So I guess I don't know if that's silver lining or not, that at least it wasn't like a close thing where they got screwed on it. But man, now if you look back at that game, and it's like if you had that win, this whole season looks differently. And we're talking about maybe one of the most fun seasons in the history of Kentucky football. As it stands, I mean, this is a nice win to sort of get things back on track for the season and make the season a lot more interesting. But man, what could have been if you just beat South Carolina, who's not very good.
Yeah, no, agreed. I'd love for this season to get to 10-2 and look back on that, because I still think 10-2 gets them in the conversation, because it would include wins over Tennessee and Texas and and Ole Miss on the road. All those would be on the road. I don't think it's going to get to that. I wouldn't mind looking back at 10-2 and going what might have been. If they think at 10-2 and looking back on what might have been, I think it would be would be in the playoffs. But that's a big stretch. I mean, it's still,
if they win those two though, Texas and Tennessee, they're in the conversation again, I think.
Listen, if you tell me right now, you give me 6-2 going to Tennessee with the opportunity, sign me up for it. Right now. I just give me the opportunity. That's all I'm asking for.
And that's an incredibly fun season. I mean, that's what you want as a Kentucky football fan. All right, Ohio State beats Michigan State 38-7. The Buckeyes will host Iowa at 3:30 this Saturday. Let's check in on quarterback Will Howard, because they obviously haven't played any competition. He's looked great to this point. He was 21 of 31 in this game, 244 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, but the interception is the story here. I don't know if you saw the replay, Skinny, but or saw it live maybe because you're at the bar, but it was an ugly, panicked, just threw it right to the defense type of play that then led to points. Is there any concern there? I mean, I feel like this play is getting overhyped because there's been nothing else to talk about with Ohio State to this point. But I'd also say, I mean, that was one of those plays where you go, hold on, has this guy just not been playing anybody good yet? And there's going to be some concerns here once he faces real defenses. Yeah,
I think I get that point of the argument from those that would make it, but I also would say this guy's also played in big games in the Big 12 against good competition. Maybe not Michigan competition, maybe not Penn State competition, but he's played in big games and had success in the Big 12. So yeah, I think it's a kind of a one-off. Maybe it's to some degree he knows that you can take a chance or take a risk or make a risky play, because at the end of the day, it's one play and you're going to win by 5 scores anyway, which they did. I mean, they win 38-7. But I think, if you're the coaching staff, you have to let him know, hey, when we get into some of these, we're not going to have many of them, these one possession games, taking care of the football is paramount. And I think he's a good enough player to understand that. And the one thing is, though, I think it's fair because the schedule's just been so awful to this point. You wonder, is the shoe going to drop? I don't think it's going to drop this week either. But, when they face an Oregon, is it just going to be such a step up? But at the same time, this team is so damn talented. I don't even know if that really matters. I really don't. In fact, maybe this team is a group that wants that challenge.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. Like, this team is so good. They're still going to be competing for a national championship, but it becomes a Kyle McCord question again of like, do you have a quarterback who's just good enough to get you there? But when you find yourself in that game against a Michigan or in this year against an Alabama or something, are you going to be really held back by the play of your quarterback? And I don't know if we know that answer with Will Howard yet. I definitely think he's a step up from Kyle McCord, but I'll admit, I mean, that interception, it wasn't like he was trying to force the ball into a tight window and make an aggressive play. It was like he panicked and threw it right to the defense.
Yeah, so it was a terrible decision.
Yeah, I get where people are coming from. I do think, though, I mean, it's one play and it's being talked about so much because there's just nothing negative to talk about with Ohio State football, period. So it's like they got to nitpick something. It's as they say on their show occasionally, it's buck nuts, not buck rational observers. So
that's a good point.
Yeah. There was something else I wanted to talk about, the catch by Jeremiah Smith. I don't know if the freshman, we've talked about him a lot. I'm pulling it up here for the people on YouTube, but I don't know if you saw this. These were back-to-back catches that he had. There's the one-handed grab that got him down inside the 30 there, I believe. And then right after that was the touchdown catch that he had here.
Here comes the touchdown. Yeah, I saw them both. He is ridiculous.
Well, I mean, it seems like every week we bring him up and every week you see him do something just insane. I'm wondering, though, too, watching that Alabama-Georgia game, Have you seen this kid from Alabama, Ryan Williams? Too?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Both of these guys are true freshmen
who look ready for the NFL today.
And
like literally today.
Skinny, they're making plays that there are really good receivers every year in college football. We've talked about this with the draft when drafting receivers that man, it seems like there's someone super talented every year that you can just go restock. Maybe you don't need to pay these veterans tons of money on their second and third deals. But these two dudes at their age, they're making plays that it's invoking involuntary noises from me as I'm watching these games on my couch, and I have no rooting interest. It's just holy, did you see that play? Here's the one from Ryan. Or no, that's the same one. Sorry.
Yes, touch it. That's right.
I have the Ryan Williams one here as well for Georgia. But this spin move, Skinny, when he catches this pass and then spins right there and keeps running and then spins again.
I was going to say, that second move's the one for me. That's just insane.
But look at
the spin's great. But then
how many guys can catch the ball like this?
But hang on. Watch this. Then plant
the opposite way.
That's crazy.
Yeah, he spun back the other way the second time, but the one where he catches the ball and comes down and just pirouettes straight into a full sprint, I don't know that I've ever seen somebody do it exactly like that. I mean, these two guys are just incredible is what I'm trying to say.
I would tell you, though, that game lived up to the hype, did it not?
Oh, it was Now, it was a little anticlimactic that it got so out of hand early. Georgia really had to climb back into the game and try to make it close, and they did. They made it fun at the end.
Took the lead.
But it was a little bit of a bummer that Alabama got out by 3 touchdowns right away so early. That just took a little bit of the excitement out in the first half. That's it for the Ohio State game. The last game we have is Texas Tech Cincinnati. The Red Raiders pull one out 44-41. Cincinnati has the bye this week, similar to Kentucky, but UC missed a long field goal at the buzzer that would have tied this one up. Skinny, I just don't know how you lose a game when you put up 555 yards of offense and your quarterback goes 31-45 for 426 yards and 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, and listen, I for full disclosure, I thought the call was terrible. I didn't think it was targeting, but I still, to this day, the officials make that call. It should have been a penalty, and then the rule being the 10-second runoff, I think, is a damn stupid rule, because if you're running a hurry-up offense, Rick, chances are you're not using 10 seconds to get the next playoff. So why did they put a 10-second? I know it's a rule, but why is that the rule, a 10-second runoff, when the officials are the ones that threw the flag and then said, no, sorry, no penalty?
Essentially,
that's bad.
They called targeting on Texas Tech.
Yes.
Then picked it up, and as a result of that, they have to do a 10-second runoff. So basically, they gave UC a huge advantage by calling the penalty, but then they took the penalty away, so they no longer get the advantage, and they got screwed out of 10 seconds late in the game when they're trying to drive. They ended up missing a long field goal.
And then UC's so banged up at running back. But the unfortunate, I think the good part is it does show you that Brendan Sorsby is what you thought he was going to be and hoped to be. But they're really banged up at running back right now, and now in retrospect, Houston's just so bad that while it was nice to put up the shutout, I mean, in looking back, is this what this defense is going to be against Big 12 competition? My fear is yes, this is what this defense is going to be against Big 12 competition.
And it's terrible. I mean, the defense was awful. But you know what? I will say too, Brendan Sorsby, we've talked so much about him not turning the ball over. He finally had his first interception, and it was a costly one. It ended up making the score 41-27 at the time. It was a pick 6. So the defense didn't give up that touchdown. And
that's fact.
If that didn't happen, you're right there in the game. But again, even with that, 40 or 37 points is still too many to be giving up as a defense to Texas Tech. I think that's a real problem for them, and I don't see a fix. I mean, up front, they're just getting blown up. They don't really have much of a chance.
The flip side is, and this is what kind of sucks, because again, you talk about wiggle room if you're looking to go to a bowl, and maybe fans don't. I still think bowls are important to strive for. They are. I mean, I know there's a lot of bowls these days, and a lot of fans don't care if you go to the Tostitos blue chip sideways bowl, but I still think that's something you should strive for, and it's important. I mean, you could really easily be 5-0. That's what really sucks about all this, right? And then you look and go, okay, we got a lot of winnable games left. Now there are a lot of winnable games left, but then you go, yeah, but it's not as winnable as I thought it was because of this defense.
Yeah, but wasn't this the same thing we did last year with this group? Like, weren't a lot of their losses last year close? Early in the season.
For a while.
Yeah, before the wheels fall off. So, I mean, it feels like we're kind of headed down the same road where it's like, oh, they could have a really good record if a few things would have gone their way, but those few things didn't go their way last year, and they didn't go their way again this year. And then they're going to get in the meat of the schedule here late, and The question is, will the wheels come falling off again for them?
Yeah.
Right now, the offense looks much better. I think they have a much better quarterback in place to prevent that from happening. But if you don't ever win any of these games and he's putting up 400 yards passing, the offense is going to lose some confidence at some point too.
Yeah, I mean, the sad part is you got the last 2 games, I believe, are at Iowa State, not Kansas State, and those feel like, I mean, that gets you to 4 losses. So where's your wiggle room, right? I mean, to get to a 6-6, 7-5 mark, you just haven't given yourself any when you had a chance to give yourself a bunch.
Yep. All right, we'll talk about more in the college football arena when we get to our pick'em segment here in a second. But real quick, before we do that, let's touch on the Reds. They ended their season at 77-85. They finished 4th place in the NL Central. Honestly, it's hard for me to even bring myself to care, to come up with topics, to talk about what this Reds, we've talked about it all season, where they're at, where they're headed, which is seemingly nowhere at this point, but they are right now searching for a new manager. It was reported earlier this week that Luke Maley, Miguel Cairo, Barry Larkin, which is probably the biggest name on this list, Joe Girardi, Joe Madden, and Scott Service have been ruled out. And I question that a little bit. Skinny, do you think these guys were ruled out, or do you think they've been put on lists publicly and someone within the Reds told reporters like, hey, you can take those guys off the list, they're not being considered?
Yeah, I know. I was told by somebody that covers the team, Miguel Cairo's name, Scott Service's name. The Luke Maley one was interesting. That was not floated to me.
That's kind of what I'm interested in. Is like, was Luke Maley a serious candidate?
I think he was, but the other one was that Barry didn't want the job, but Phil Castellini may try to talk him into taking the job, and obviously that's now gone by the wayside. So I think those are all probably positive things. I do think Luke's going to make a great manager one day, but I don't know if this would have been a player manager role, or he would have hopped right from player to manager with your same guys. I just don't. No offense, but he's a strong personality in a good way. I just don't know if that was going to work.
It's hard to imagine it working, but I'm almost to the point with the Reds where nothing else interesting going on. I kind of wanted that just for the storyline. We know Luke, we covered him growing up in high school. I kind of would like to see that happen now.
And then you know who his bench coach should be, right?
Crumps.
Bill Crumplebeck.
Bill Crumplebeck from Cubcat.
And you know what the Reds will start doing a whole lot more of? Bunting. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I'd love that.
That's a little 35th district high school baseball jokes for you there.
Yep. That's good. That was good.
Oh, 6 people appreciate that. That's good stuff. Yeah, I mean, I don't really have much else other than I'm most interested right now if these names were legitimate candidates, because Barry Larkin was an interesting name to me. Obviously, everyone was talking about him. I wasn't sure if they would seriously target him or not. It seems like they maybe tried to talk to him and he wasn't interested. The Luke Maley thing, though, that would have been fascinating if that was a real option for them. It appears it's not going to be.
Yeah. I do. Honestly, I think he will be a manager one day. I do.
I do too. That. Yeah. He'll stick around the game, and he's so sharp and so good with people. He's definitely always been kind of that leadership type of guy that it makes sense.
He just looks the part, right? For some reason, guys have to look. He just looks the part.
Yeah, like you can totally see him having the oversized jacket on, taking the lineup card out of his back pocket, spitting before he talks to the umpire. I can totally see it. Yeah.
Yep.
All right, let's get into our pick'em segment, Skinny, where we finally had a good week, both of us.
Right.
You were 6-2. I was 6-2. You missed a whole set. I can't remember which one it was, but you had everything else nailed. I missed a couple of point spreads, but got everything else right. You are 15-19 overall. I am 17-17 overall. We also both hit our favorite bets of the week. I hit my Bama and Ohio State teaser. You hit your Illinois plus 17.5.
So I want to stop you there. So I decided, I made some plays on Saturday morning before I went and met my buddy. It was early in the morning. I think there were 3 people at Turfway Park at that point in the morning. So I went in, put my money in the machine, and made a bunch of parlays for Sunday and Saturday and mixed and matched stuff. I wound up, however I did it, I wound up with $3 left. And I'm like, well, I'm going to make some $3 bet here. So I had a Kentucky money line, an Alabama money line. And unfortunately, I'd rolled the dice. I told you how much I liked Illinois. I did an Illinois money line. So in the bar, as Bama rolls out to that 4-touchdown lead you mentioned, it was either late third quarter, early fourth quarter. It was 14-7 Penn State. Illinois had the football.
Yeah, you're feeling good.
And I'm like, holy cow. So the next morning, the guy I went down with, he's agonizing over me with my injury issues and stuff and asked me how I'm feeling, all that stuff. He goes, man, I was close last night. I said, yeah, you know what? My luck would have been the way the day turned out is that Illinois actually would have won outright, and Bama blowing the lead would have wound up losing the damn game. That's how that day should have ended.
Yeah, I really should have. That would have been a perfect ending for you. We'll start Saturday, 3:30, Iowa at Ohio State. 19.5-point favorites are the Buckeyes. The total is 45.5.
Yeah, this is my favorite bet of the week, Rick.
Really?
Yes, I'm going Ohio State 34, Iowa 0.
Okay. 34-0. So that is the under, and obviously the OSU cover. I'm similar in the Ohio State side of things. I like 35-10. So I'm going OSU and the over here. I have a feeling I might regret that over call, but when Iowa gets involved with Ohio State, it just feels like a couple years ago, I remember us talking about this. It was some number where we're like, that's never going to happen in an Iowa game. And Ohio State got it themselves. They won like 49-0.
Yes. No, I remember the game specifically. I thought it was going to be absolute. I think we both thought Iowa was going to get shut out, but it's like, okay, Ohio State will do just enough to win.
Yeah, it'll be like 30-0 or something.
No, it was like literally 3-and-out, interception, 3-and-out, 3-and-out, 3-and-out. Listen, I think Iowa's a little bit better offensively than they've been, but they're not much better offensively than they've been.
Yeah, you're right about that. I'm going to go OSU in the over, but I have a feeling I will regret that. Sunday at 1.
It is interesting, by the way, this week. Both UC and Kentucky are both off.
That's right. Yeah, sorry. I mentioned that during our college football segment, but the pick'em, neither one of them will be out there, so you don't have to worry about them on this week's card. Sunday at 1 p.m., we've got Ravens at the Bengals. The Ravens are a 2.5-point favorite. The total is 48.5.
This again feels like Vegas is begging people to take Baltimore, right? It's less than a field goal. Yeah, it's on the road, but it's less than a field goal. And my God, we all watched them on Sunday night.
I think so too.
And I have no reason of logic just after watching them on Sunday to say, how do the Bengals stop then? And then I go, nope, it's the damn NFL. Weird stuff happens. Lamar maybe throws a weird pick here. You know, they get a couple of penalties that wipe out first downs, and the Bengals are able to get him in a couple of 3rd and longs and get him off the field. I'm going to go Bengals 30, Ravens 27.
So that is the over. Bengals and the over for you. I like the Bengals and the over as well. I'm going 27-24. It's totally just with my heart. I mean, I have no logical reason, like you said, after watching the Ravens last week, knowing what they can do with the rushing attack against the Bengals run defense. But it is the NFL, and the Bengals really, really need this game. And I still believe in Joe Burrow, man. I think he's going to find a way.
And that's the thing. And to a large extent, all hands are on deck, right? You know, I think Mims is an upgrade over Trent Brown at right tackle. I didn't think Trent Brown was playing awful, but I think
but Mims has looked good.
Mims has looked good. So you're really as healthy as you've been on that side of the ball, and you're getting the reinforcements back on that defensive front. Do I think it turns that defense into a juggernaut? No, not even close. But I think it makes that defense better, and that's all you need them to be is just better.
Yep. All right. Do you have a favorite bet of the week for us?
No, I did. Ohio State. I'm all in. The chips are all in on Ohio State in that game. Less than 3 touchdowns against Iowa. Yuck.
Okay. NFL home dog teaser for me. Going away from college. I do not like the college board this week. Just not much I see there. I'm going to go Bengals plus 8.5, Rams plus 9. The 2 home dogs. Tease them up, take them, and live with it.
I like it.
All right. Quick Ask Anything round here.
Yep.
Just a couple of questions. Both of these are sports related this time. Honest opinion, do the Bengals make the playoffs this year? If so, how far will they go? If not, who gets fired?
I think if they do get in, they go far, because I think it will show that they ended up playing well when all was said and done. And I think that possibility exists. But again, this is such a pivotal game. I mean, sitting at 1-4 with a loss already in the division, you got a huge hole to climb out of. But I still think this is a team that makes the playoffs, and I do think it has a chance to go far.
I really like that point, though, because it feels similar to the year they made the run to the Super Bowl, where it's like, if they're going to do it, they have to play so well down the stretch that they're going to be on fire.
And they did, and then they were. I don't think it would be. I know where you're going with that question, probably, because it probably means the defense would have let this team down, right? That it would be Lou Anarumo. I think it would be a position coach before it would be that.
I think fans probably want it to be Zach Taylor. I'm of the opinion that if you're going to be doing things like that, maybe it's Lou Anarumo, but probably not anything, even if they don't make the playoffs this year.
It's just not usually in that organization's nature. I mean, if things collapsed like this team went 5-12 and the defense was the complete reason why it went, then yeah, but
they're not going to do that. They're going to be around 500 worst case, I would think.
Yeah. You still have the cachet of this to fall back on. And again, I know it's in the past, but you still have to factor this in. Super Bowl, AFC Championship game, winning record without Joe Burrow for half the season, and then whatever becomes of this season, right? I mean, that's
honestly,
still,
you can just stop it. They made it to a Super Bowl with freaking Zach.
That
you
buys you a
realize
lot
what
of
this franchise has been for the last 30 years.
Yeah, it buys you some time.
Yeah. If the National Baseball Hall of Fame unilaterally lets Pete Rose in, along with 4 other guys without a vote, who should the other guys be?
Oh my gosh.
Barry Bonds has to be. That's my number one. I don't have any other thoughts, but Barry Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame.
Bonds, Clemens, A-Rod. Who am I missing from that era?
I don't know. Is there anyone else that didn't get in that deserved to really be?
I'm sure. I'm just drawing a complete blank.
But none that like really jump. Bonds is the one to me where it's like that dude.
Rafael Palmeiro. Go back and look at some of his numbers.
Yeah, I guess the numbers are there.
They're damn good.
Yeah. I understand the issue with the steroid era. To me, it's more of just like a thing you point to. You said it happened. There's an asterisk there. We know they were cheating, but like Barry Bonds did things with a baseball bat that we'll never see again. And it's he's probably the most incredible athlete in terms of dominance that I've watched.
Yeah, the thing that sucks too is if he hadn't even done that and used the pads, he wouldn't have put up the ridiculous numbers he did. But I still think he was on the path to be a Hall of Fame player. Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't have been that crazy like he did it, but he would have still been a Hall of Fame player in my opinion.
I just always think back to that dude would get like 2 pitches per game to swing it. Everything else would be completely out of the zone, intentionally walked, and he'd hit one of the 2 out of the park every time. It was unbelievable.
You knew that his head was the size of a watermelon and for a reason. But to your point, I mean, watching those games in that era to see those, and that's literally what you used to watch. Going, they're going to walk pitch around him, and then it'd be that one fastball that a guy tried to sneak by him, and it would be boom into the bay.
This is the era where everyone's still watching like ESPN and SportsCenter and stuff constantly, and so your TV would just be locked on ESPN, and there'd be another sporting event maybe, but they'd break in and be like, "Oh, Bonds watch, he's up to bat, he's chasing the record," right? So they'd flash his game, and then the catcher would stand up, hold his arm out, and it'd be an intentional walk. Be like, "All right, not this time. We'll switch back to whatever you were watching."
Exactly. By the way, did Shoeless Joe Jackson ever get in? If not, he needs to go in too. Let's get Shoeless Joe.
Shoeless Joe. That's actually the one right there. That's a good point. Shoeless Joe should be in. Yes.
All right, let's get Shoeless Joe in. So we got our 4.
All right.
A-Rod, even though A-Rod's a turd. A-Rod, Roger Clemens, Barry Bonds, and Shoeless Joe Jackson. Those are our guys.
There it is.
And
thanks for the questions.
All right, good stuff. Thanks very much. Keep those questions coming. Again, George, I've got your question that you sent to me on email. I'll take care of that one next week. It was very interesting to me. I got to do a research on a couple of the people on that list for full disclosure, so I'll answer that question next week. Don't forget to head to the Twitterverse, the Xverse, hit up the hashtag AskSkinnyAnything. For Rick Broering, I'm Richard Skinner. It's been the Skinny Podcast, the weekly potpourri edition, presented by Blake the Attorney Maislin.